At 79 years old, Eleanor Miles lived in a house that felt more like a museum than a home. Every wall carried a memory, every shelf a reminder of a life that once glowed brighter than the sun. She had been one of the most beloved actresses of her generation, adored not just for her beauty but for the innocence, humor, and depth she brought to every role. Yet the applause she once heard every day had faded into a distant memory. The house that once echoed with celebration now held only the soft ticking of an old clock and the occasional creaking of the wooden floors beneath her slow, careful steps. Eleanor sat in her armchair, wrapped in a shawl her younger sister Lila had knitted years ago. She traced the worn edges with trembling fingers, remembering the warmth and laughter that once surrounded her. People saw her as a legend, a symbol of cinema's golden years, but behind that image lived a woman who carried a heartbreaking secret. The world saw fame, she felt grief. The world saw her strength, she carried guilt. One afternoon, as rain tapped softly on the window, the mailman left a thick envelope in her box. Eleanor opened it slowly, expecting yet another request for an autograph or an invitation to speak at an event she would decline. But when she read the letter, her heart pounded. It was from the film studio where her career had begun decades ago, inviting her to attend a grand reunion celebrating the actors and directors from her era. Most people would have felt honored, but Eleanor felt the opposite. The reunion meant going back to the place where the darkest moment of her life happened. It meant reopening wounds she had spent years trying to forget. It meant remembering Lila. Lila had been more than a sister. She was Eleanor's best friend, her biggest supporter, and the person who understood her better than anyone else. When Eleanor's acting career took off, Lila joined her as a stunt double and assistant, always smiling, always saying she was proud to stand behind her. Their bond was stronger than fame, stronger than ambition. But one day during filming, a stunt went horribly wrong. There was a miscalculation, a slip, a moment too fast to undo. Lila fell, and in that single instant, Eleanor's world shattered. The accident took her sister's life, leaving behind questions that haunted Eleanor every day. Should she have insisted Lila not perform the stunt? Should she have convinced her to stay away from the industry? Should she have protected her more? The questions never left her, and the guilt became part of her existence. When she read the studio's letter, that guilt came back with full force. Unable to calm her thoughts, Eleanor climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, a place she had avoided for years. The dust clung to her feet as she stepped inside. Old trunks and boxes lay like abandoned memories waiting to be uncovered. She opened the largest trunk and saw a collection of scripts, dresses, and preserved letters from fans who believed she had changed their lives. She touched the costumes she once wore, feeling the spark of her youth return for just a moment. Then she found the photograph she had feared most, a picture of her and Lila, taken on the very morning of the accident. They were smiling, holding hands, full of hope, unaware of how fragile life was. Eleanor pressed the photo to her chest and wept. Decades had passed, yet the pain felt just as fresh as the moment day it happened. Her shoulders shook with tears as she whispered, "I'm sorry, Lila. I'm so sorry." That night, Eleanor barely slept. She sat by her window watching the sky fade from black to blue, thinking about the reunion. She had spent her whole life running from the studio that took so much from her, but part of her wondered if maybe going back could finally help her face the truth. As the sun rose, she made her decision. She would go. The next morning, Eleanor dressed in a simple blue dress and an elegant coat. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw a woman changed by time but not defeated by it. Her hair was silver, her skin soft with age, and her eyes carried stories no script could ever capture. With each step toward the studio, her heart raced. The drive felt longer than ever, each mile pulling her deeper into the past she had tried to escape. When she finally arrived, the large building stood before her, modernized but still carrying the spirit of her memories. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. Young actors recognized her immediately. They rushed to greet her with admiration and excitement, asking about her classic films and her iconic performances. She smiled politely, grateful for their kindness but distant in her thoughts. Every hallway she walked through brought a flood of memories. She could almost hear Lila's laughter echoing through the room where they used to rehearse lines. She could almost see herself at 22, nervous, hopeful, training for a scene while Lila encouraged her from the sidelines. The studio lights above her cast long shadows, reminding her of the day everything changed. Eleanor made her way to the old stage, the stage she had avoided for years. It looked different, yet somehow it still felt the same. She stood at the very spot where the accident had happened. Her breath trembled, her hands shook. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I miss you." During the reunion event, the director asked her to sit for an interview that would be broadcast to the audience and later aired as part of the documentary. At first she didn't want to speak, but something inside her urged her to be honest, for the first time in her life. When the interviewer asked, "What has been the hardest part of your journey?" Eleanor paused. The room fell silent. Even the camera crew sensed something deep was coming. After a long breath, she finally let her heart speak. She said that the hardest part was not the fame, not the pressure, not the criticism. It was losing her sister. She explained how Lila had always stood behind her, helping her shine, and how the tragedy had left a void no award could ever fill. The audience listened with tears in their eyes. Some had admired Eleanor for years but never knew the painful truth she carried. She confessed that she had blamed herself for the accident, but attending the reunion had given her the courage to face the memory instead of hiding from it. Her voice cracked as she said, "I want to remember my sister with love, not with guilt. She deserves that, and maybe, I deserve that too." When the reunion was over, Eleanor returned home feeling lighter, as if a weight she had carried for decades had finally loosened its grip. That night she placed Lila's photo on her bedside table, not buried in a box or hidden in the attic, but right beside her where it belonged. She touched the frame gently, feeling a sense of peace she had long forgotten. She opened her window, letting in the soft breeze of the evening. The sky was painted in soft gold and purple, as if nature itself understood her healing. For the first time in many years, she did not cry out of sadness. She cried out of relief. She realized that healing doesn't mean forgetting. Healing means remembering without breaking, living without running, loving without fear. At 79, Eleanor Miles had endured a tragedy that shaped her entire life, but she had finally found the strength to face it and let go of the guilt she had carried alone. She understood now that her sister would never have wanted her to suffer. She knew Lila would have wanted her to live, to smile, to continue shining even if the world grew dimmer. And so Eleanor closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Thank you, Lila, for everything." The night wrapped around her gently, like her sister's embrace, and for the first time in a long time, she felt whole.